Hi, this is Chris Hoy. Thank you for joining me on Create with Chris. I wanted to share with you my latest design. It's called Got Candy, and this is my Halloween design for the treat box. And what is so much fun about these treat boxes, the front and the back panels Velcro on so they can be switched out easily for any season. And I've done quite a few, and I have quite a few more in my sketchbook, so keep an eye out. We're going to be doing more in the future. But I wanted to share with you the technique on creating the ghost, to create that ethereal, kind of ghostly, transparent look. And this is such a fun technique, super easy to do. It just almost evolves magically. So grab your brushes and let's get started. I always coat my surface with a layer of multi-purpose sealer, just an excellent primer, using an 1.5-inch short wash to pull the product mostly from the middle of the plaque to the outer edges. That's just going to help keep the medium from running down the side edges, keeps the edges nice and clean. Smooth it out nice and even, let it dry, give it a quick sand. This is going to ensure that I won't have any problems with the paint adhering. Also, it leaves the surface silky smooth, easy on the brushes, and it also makes brush strokes a little bit smoother. I'm using a 3/4-inch oval wash to put on a nice even coat of cobblestone, and this is in the ghost area only. Don't forget the little shoulder over there. I'm not putting 2 coats on. I normally do the base coat nice and heavy, but I'm just allowing the paint to go on smoothly, not leaving any brush strokes, kind of pulling it out evenly. With the ghost, it kind of adds to that look of, you can see a little bit of movement in the background, just adds that layer. I am top coating it with a thin coat of Snow White, and I'm using the oval wash. The paint is really thin. I apply it, smooth it around, move it around, and then smooth it out. The brush strokes, the movement that it creates will really add to that ethereal look of ghostliness. And I'm just allowing the paint to cover it evenly. I still see the brush strokes. That's just a really nice effect. Lifting, I have a lot of water on my brush, lifting any heavy wetness off and just wiping it on a paper towel. Then I take my brush, I'm not using the chisel edge, I'm using the flat, kind of doing a slip slap, just to smooth it out, blend it out. It can be light and dark, just not spotty. And I'll let that dry. If you're in an area where the paint dries up really quick and you don't have time to play with the paint very long, use a distress mister and just kind of mist it with water, or use a quick dry glaze medium. Makes all the difference. I'm in Ohio. We don't have to worry most of the time about the paint drying faster, and I have more time to work with it. I let it dry. You can see how much it toned down since it dried. Loaded the toe of my 1/2-inch Awesome Angle with Snow White. My light source is the top left, and I also want to make sure that his little face is going to be nice and bright. So I'm just adding floats of Snow White in. It's still pretty thin down. When it dries, it'll be a lot lighter. I don't mind that shift from light to dark. Just, I don't want to have any harsh edges where the paint stops. So I'm loading the brush, blending it out on my palette, making sure I have enough moisture in my brush to move it around a good bit before, and I can work with it before I have to reload. And mostly top left, the shoulder, the hand, the face, his little tummy area. I want to make sure that's nice and bright. Many layers. Don't let this be the first and only layer. And you can see how I soften that paint out on that edge so that it has that a little bit of texture. I like the way that looks. A little bit on the shoulder. let it dry, go back and add more. It always looks better to have many coats as opposed to one heavy coat, and also allows you to look at it and see where more needs to be added to enhance or tone it down. Adding the shading, this is Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is a beautiful color, but it is also a very strong and powerful color. So I always say use Payne's Gray with a bit of caution because it can very easily overwhelm. This is a white ghost. Putting this Payne's Gray on there should not turn him blue. Just adds that hint of cool shadow color. And you can see I'm just putting a very, very little bit on my brush, blending it out. I can always add more. A little bit of paint makes a big, big difference. The highlights are on the top left. My shadows are going to be on the bottom and right side. And you can see from how much that float is glistening as to how wet it is. Keep it very light. I can add more, but I do know under the hat it's going to have a stronger shadow, so I can go in and really deepen that up a little bit. Once I get above, I'm just going to blend it out so it's not quite so strong. But you can see I can even go back and work with shades that I added earlier because it's still wet. Once it starts to dry though, just let it completely dry before you mess with it, or it'll start to pull the paint back up. And sometimes that becomes an issue. This is my brand new Diverse dry brush. This brush is amazing. It does so many different techniques, but the number one is for dry brushing, and it is exactly that. The brush needs to be very dry, and the paint cannot be watered down. And you can see it has a blend of different bristles with almost a cone shape on the tip of the brush. So it's going to really hone in the central area and blend out. This is a game of patience, so allow the brush to create those highlights. Don't try to overload with paint to make it go faster, because that will not work. I always load my brush, wipe it off on a paper towel to remove that excess paint, and then just work an area. And you can see how long I spend in an area, and it's just almost magical. It just starts to evolve and it looks absolutely beautiful. It's a soft highlight. Now that the shadows are in there, you can see that the highlights become very subdued and diminished, so they need to be brightened back up. The tip of his little tail, his tummy, shoulder, face, and more can always be added. So if you're not sure, stop and then look at it in a bit and see if it needs to be added. And then just go back and dry brush a little bit more. It's such an amazing brush. Look at the face, and it just absolutely wonderful. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Please put them in the comments below. If you like my video, make sure you subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos. If you're new, thank you for joining me. If you're a repeat viewer, thank you for coming back. Look at that dry brush. Isn't that just absolutely fantastic? A little bit on the shoulder. Some of my favorite parts of painting are adding that color that just makes such a world of difference. And in this particular design, it is aqua sky, and it's just a hint of color, but watch what it does to the overall coloring of the ghost. Just that little hint of aqua sky turns that ghost, he almost looks, instead of dark, he becomes very cool and more flowing, and it seems like it adds life and dimension, just kind of ramps it up considerably. And you can see I use mostly water, just a hint of color. I don't want him to be blue. It doesn't take much, just that little bit. Look at that on the tip of the tail, just a few little strokes, just a touch under his neck right there. Watch how it turns that shading under his top knot, just makes it look very cool. Now, if it does become too overwhelming, you can always go back and brighten the white up. But I wanted to bring that Cherry Merlot in, and you can see I was very timid about how much paint I applied. But after I added just a couple little floats of that, it just pulls the deep colors from the pumpkin and the hat, it pulls it into the ghost. Just really balances it out so nicely. It's just such a hint of color, but wow, what a difference that makes. And I can always go back and add more. So I had painted the pumpkin up. I love the way the Cherry Merlot worked with the pumpkin, so I just had to add it onto the ghost. I'm using my chalk pencil to sketch on the hand, and I didn't want to do the hand before I painted the hat because I wanted to make sure that the hat would, it's kind of transparent, so I wanted to make sure that the hat would be seen kind of peeking out through the hand. And once it dries, you'll be able to see that the hat is very, very visible. This is just a light float of Snow White, and you can see how that's, now that it's dry, how it's toned down. I'm using my painter's palette to create the eyes. Loaded my number 4 Spectacular stencil brush with soft black. Brush it over a paper towel to remove excess, and then position the stencil and gently stencil the eye shape. Most of the times I put 2 coats on eyes to make sure they're really dark, but for the ghost I decided just 1 coat, and then I'll go back and add some more shading to that. For the nose, I'm using my painter's palette, and you can see by it being translucent, it's so easy for placement. I drop down to a number 3 Spectacular stencil. Always make sure to brush it over a paper towel to remove excess. That's going to ensure that it won't, you'll get nice, clean, crisp edges. Loaded my Epic script liner with soft black. And my liners, this is one of my signature brushes. It's a little bit longer than a liner, shorter than a script. Excellent control, but if it's loaded correctly, I can get a nice, long, beautiful stroke before I have to reload. And making sure to put those little curves at the end of the mouth, and look how happy he is. This is my diverse dry brush. The one I used on the ghost was a number 12. This is a number 10. Just picking up some of that warm sunset. Wipe it off on a paper towel, otherwise the cheeks are going to be too strong and too dark. I always build the cheeks up at the same time, so I work on the left just a little bit, then I'm going to switch over to the right and work on it a little bit. If you've ever created a perfect cheek and then you try to make the other one match, it's so difficult, but if you work on them both at the same time, they will build up and they'll be balanced and they'll look fantastic. And I'm not reloaded my diverse dry brush. I'm just using that same original load. There's so many bristles in it, and it just gives such a soft result. This is where I go back in the eye with soft black, and I'm going to float a little bit along the top and left. I only put 1 layer of stenciling, so when I float this soft black on, it will be visible. I'm not so sure it is on film, but it's very visible. Picking up a little bit of Heritage Brick on my 1/8 inch awesome angle. My angles are a little bit longer. Well, they're a lot longer than most angles, so you'll get a nice long stroke. Highlight the top with Tangerine and add 3 little dip dots with my stylus on each cheek. I always think that little bit extra kind of adds a little twinkle on him, a little sparkle. Picking up Aqua Sky, and this is my secret color, and I'm going to float it in the bottom and right side of each eye. Adds a little bit of color, a little bit of life, also adds contour, and it makes it look a little rounded. Teeny tiny highlight of Snow White on the tip of the nose. And I'm using my Epic script liner. A little tiny comma stroke in the bottom right of each one of the eyes. That brings a little bit of life into the eyes. And then I always like to add a little tiny dip dot, but for the ghost I did a couple dip dots in the top left, and I used the smaller end of my stylus. Look, that's all he needs. It looks great. Using my Epic script liner to add the ribbon around his neck with Warm Sunset. And this is just a simple stroke. And I did use that white bond marker to trace my line drawing on. I like that because if you use a chalk pencil or graphite paper, it has to be erased. The white chalk pencil is a ceramic based, I don't know if you want to call it lead, but it disappears with water. That way you don't have to worry about erasing it with an eraser. Sometimes you get those awful smudge lines on it. It's really, really hard to remove. With this, you just take a clean brush, a brush full of clean water, just wipe it over after everything's dry, and that chalk line just amazing. It just disappears. But you have to keep that in mind too. If you're painting over something and you kind of sketched it out with the white chalk pencil, it'll disappear. So if you brush over it. Taking some tangerine to highlight. Think about where the light source is, the top left, and bring that in. It just really helps to brighten the ribbon up and bring a little more color into that area. If it becomes too bright and blends in with the ghost, you can always go back and add a little more of the heritage brick to tone it down. Using my number 5 radical round to base coat the treat bag. I love this brush. It's another one of my brushes. It has a nice sharp point so I can get those edges in really nice, but it has a fat belly on it so I can load a lot of paint and really get in there to pretty much base coat it without any problem at all. And I'm just stroking that in. Kind of the same concept, just making sure that I get it on nice and smooth and even. It's not a heavy, solid application of paint, and you can see how wet the paint is. I like the way that looks. For the candy, I really had fun with the candy. I used my painter's pal and my number 2 radical round to paint the round candies and the stick candies. And I just wanted to alternate between the purple and the green and the orange candies. And so I'm just kind of picking up the purple, and it's Gentle Heather that I use for the little round candy and the stick, going in with Warm Sunset for the orange. Kind of trying to decide. I did alternate some of the sizes of the round candy just for a little diversity, using foliage green for the green candies. Oh, I guess I did decide to go with the spiced pumpkin on the orange candies, and I top coated that stick candy a little bit. And just going back in, I do want my candies to be kind of solid, so I'm going back in to make sure that I have a nice opaque coverage on those. And it's just super easy to use the painter's pal for the round candies. It just makes it really nice. I have trouble painting round shapes, and that just ensures that it's going to look really good. Using Snow White to highlight the left side of the bag, and this is light cinnamon on the bottom and the right side. And this is the first coat of shading that I'm adding, and this is the first time I painted this design, and I was not sure exactly. I want it to look full and bulky, so I'm just putting layers on and kind of going back. While that's drying, I jump back to the ribbon, my Epic script liner, and Snow White, and look how that makes that ribbon stand out. Not putting it everywhere, just where I want it to catch that light and look like a nice bright highlight. And because the ghost isn't super white, it should be able to have a nice contrast. On my 1/8 inch awesome angle, put a little bit of Payne's Gray and just very, very lightly floated around the eyes. I want it to look like the eyes are set in the face and not just painted on top of the face. And a little bit under the nose and under the mouth. Just that little bit of paint makes a big difference. I stuck my hand in some wet paint. So be careful you don't pick up wet paint. Make sure you know what's dry and what's wet. But I want to make sure that's super soft. And look what a difference that is. It just, all of a sudden, it kind of goes, it just elevates it from cartoony, just adds, ramps it up a notch or two. And I just have such a hint of color because I know I can always go back and add more, but make sure you blend it out and there's no lines underneath of it. And my paint's super wet, so I can even go back and adjust those. I did put a little bit under the eyebrows. I always have fun painting candy. I just kept the colors very simple. Baby duck for that stick, and foliage green, spiced pumpkin, and gentle heather for the purple. Added some cherry merlot stripes on the baby duck stick. Now I'm going in, I loaded the toe of my awesome angle with cherry merlot. Gosh, that's such a pretty color. It's a newer color, and it just has a nice, rich purple glow to it. Keep this simple. I shaded all of the green ones with plantation pine, and all the purple gentle heather ones with that cherry merlot, and then for the orange ones, they're shaded with heritage brick. And I tried to stagger the stripes and the polka dots so that they were kind of alternated, so there weren't a bunch of polka dotted candies together. And really, it's just a very small detail that's not super visible, but I thought they turned out great, and I love how they look all clustered together. Adding highlights on the green ones with celery shoot and just softly blending it out. And on the stick as well. I decided to go ahead and shade and highlight before I put the decorations on. I tried doing some of the decorations before I shaded it, and they sort of kind of disappear because the candies are so tiny. So anytime you're working with small detail, keep that in consideration. Highlighted the orange with tangerine, and the purple, I just use white on that. A lot of white. Okay, my fingers are my favorite. I'm using my Epic Script liner to decorate the candies, and if you're not familiar with my line of brushes, I do have quite a few videos that are available to view that you can see how awesome they are, so be sure to check that out. I put a baby duck swirl on the green candy, soft black stripes on the orange, and then I'm just dotting some baby duck dots on the green candy and tangerine on the purple. I wanted to do something a little bit different on the orange candy, so I decided to put a swirl on that, and I'm using soft black for that. And you can see how far, if your brush is loaded correctly, you can paint quite a bit before you need to reload. And I started the candies, and then I would decorate here and there until they were kind of all decorated up, and I love the way they turned out. Now that they are completely dry, I'm taking just a hint of Payne's Gray, putting those at the bottom of the candies and a little bit to separate them out. I'm using my 1/8 inch awesome angle, and you can see what a difference this makes. I did go up the candies to just give them a little more, it adds a little richness to it. Don't do the yellow one with Payne's Gray because they're not friends at all. Blue and yellow do not mix well. Now that I have the decorations on, the shading on, I'm just going to go in, add that little rich line of highlight. And look what a difference that makes. It just brightens them up, makes them, I guess the word of the day is sparkle, because it really finishes them up very, very nicely. Well, I think once that shadowing is added, then it's very obvious that a stronger highlight is needed. And then I wanted to highlight the top edge of the bag. And that's going to push that Payne's Gray shadowing back in behind. Gives a nice, clean, crisp edge. And it makes the bag look a little more finished. Need to add a little more shading and highlighting on the bag. It looks just a little bit flat. I'm pulling in some Snow White just to brighten up where it might be highlighted just a little more. I didn't want to smooth it out too much because the bag needs to look bulky and full. Picking up just a hint of Payne's Gray. All of my shadows are Payne's Gray, and I wanted to bring that into the bag to kind of pull that color in. Just a hint of color, mostly water, but you can see what a difference that has made. Picked up a little bit of soft black to put that handle in. And I'm using my Epic script liner, but the handle is going to go, the ghost is holding it, so it will show through his hand. So it's going to be a little bit translucent where his hand is holding on to it. And I will let that dry, and then I can tone that down. I thought it would be fun to bring a little bit of that aqua sky into the bag. I used it in other parts of the design. I thought it just needed to balance it out. A little bit of soft black to really deepen that shading on the bag, just a hint of color. I used a lot of different colors in the bag, and it ended up being a really nice combination. Add a highlight on that handle. And on the other side, the part in his hand's not going to have a highlight on it. And it's just going to be a little bit subdued. So I'm taking a little bit of Snow White, and I'm just going to go over that part that is in his hand. So it looks like you can kind of see through his hand where he's holding that. Add a little bit of shading in behind that candy. Look what a difference. I love adding these little touches of color that just really make a big difference. Brighten that hand up just a little bit on that left side, and it mutes down that handle just a touch as well. Just a hint of color. The hand on the other side, I didn't do a lot to it yet, so now that the hat is finished, I'm just pulling in the colors that I used on the ghost to shade and highlight. Used a little bit of that Cherry Merlot, and then I brought some of that in on the bag as well. Want to add a little shadow against the handle. It looks like it's shading from the handle. And that blue was a little too strong, so I just toned it down with some white. So it's still there, it's just not as prominent. Brightening up the hand, it needs to be the same brightness as the hand on the other side, but I don't want to lose that translucency of the hat behind it. This is another little touch that makes a big, big difference. This is Aqua Sky. I've loaded the toe of my 1/8 inch angle. I'm just shading it down the right side, kind of on the bottom right of the round candies. It almost gives them maybe a glassy look. They just really resonate. They're just beautiful. Love how that turned out. Adding a little more Cherry Merlot on the bag. I just thought it was a little bit dull. Wasn't sure when I first added it if it would be too much. Ended up really liking it. Wanted to put a little bit of a shadow or shading around that handle, just so it looks like it's really grabbing onto that bag. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, the lettering for the treat bag did not film. I used my Epic script liner and warm sunset to paint the letters, and then I deepened the bottom third with heritage brick, highlighted the top third with tangerine, and brightened the top again with baby duck. And then I thinned down some light cinnamon and painted a very transparent drop shadow below and to the right of all the letters. When everything was dry, I removed all the tracing lines and I varnished it with an ultra matte varnish. Everything I used is listed in the links below, including the surface, pattern, and supplies. I love how this turned out and I hope you do too. Let me know if you have any comments or questions. I would love to hear from you. If you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel, that helps me out, and you won't miss out on upcoming videos. I hope you learned a few new tips, tricks, and techniques to make your painting life a little easier and a lot more fun. Remember, a little bit of paint makes a big difference. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to our next painting adventure together.